I've called this script Watchdog because it's got to be called something, and it is in fact a stripped down version of my Sentry Watchdog. Keeps an eye on the Sentry alarm, which it's got a lot more functionality than the one that I'm publishing now. But the main reason I'm publishing this one, let's get rid of that, is because to offer examples for CSS styling, because although it's very functional, it is a watchdog that can keep pinging the designated client. In this case, the client is my router 0.1, and according to what it's set up to, in this case it keeps pinging it every 10 seconds. That's for demonstration purposes. The other setting, I suppose we can go down and have a look, is in the heartbeat, where everything is periodic. Let's open that out. So this is the one that's pinging every 10 seconds. It's just dividing the second count by 10. This is a more, I say more practical, depends what you're after. This one pings every minute. Depends on how urgent. If it's something that has to be online all the time, like my alarm for instance, then perhaps pinging every 10 seconds would be the right way to go. If it's pinging remote sensors to make sure that their battery hasn't died or something, then pinging every minute might even be a bit too quick. So I mean, you can change this to see. But that's how it's set up at the moment. The ping is periodic, so it requires timer, so a clock basically. So the Watchdog has clock functionality, and if it's got a clock it might as well have some styling to make the clock decently viewable. If it's got a clock, then it may as well have a scheduler. So that's what we have here. It's a very versatile scheduler. I'll go back into that in a minute. But so basically we've got a clock that can schedule events and a watchdog timer that can trigger an event if it loses connection with its client. Down at the bottom here, there's a couple of routines. One is the user recovery. If the watchdog loses contact, it can optionally be made to jump here. User's watchdog recovery code. So you put what you want in here. I've got it set to do a bounce, which is toggle the relay, wait 5 seconds, and then toggle it again. So it doesn't matter what the previous state of the relay was. Let's say this was on a Sonoff S20 device and using the mains output of that to drive the router, and then monitoring the router, and if it loses contact, then it'll bounce, turn the main socket off for 5 seconds, turn it back on, which hopefully will cause the router to reboot and reconnect. It's all to do with the relay though, so if we have a relay available, then we might as well have a local physical button for controlling it as well, so which we have here. So it can cater to normally a GPIO 0 button, because that's what's often on board a lot of devices for flashing, but it can be any button you set up further up, as well as the user recovery, which will bounce the way it's set up here at the moment. It will bounce the relay. There's a user schedule, so when the user schedule period occurs, it will jump to here and carry out any code that you put in here, and it'll report that it has the time put in the log. So it's very controllable. It has a clock. Let's run it. So it's called Watchdog, but equally it could be called Scheduler. You might not even want to use the Watchdog facility, so it could be called Scheduler. It's just a title, you don't even have to display that. It can be whatever you want, or not at all. Main purpose for this, so despite its Watchdog and Scheduler capabilities, is as CSS examples. So let's get to that, which means showing all the things that can optionally be hidden. Button, Watchdog, options, development options. And might as well look at the scheduler. Turn it all on. That should be it. So that's a bit different. So there's the relay control button, which, if you noticed, I'll stop it and start it again in a sec, but the time is 11:15. Now if you have a look at these scheduled times, and I'll come back to this, but intuitively green is a scheduled off, red is a scheduled on, orange is sort of between them, so it's a scheduled toggle. The pink is a scheduled bounce, that's got a little bit more urgency to it. There's a toggle again. You can have multiple events. The blue is a user routine, which this says to do a bounce, but you can do whatever you want. Black is a device reboot, so at the moment this would reboot itself at 3:15 in the morning. These are just for example. This is a scheduler enabled, so this is part of the styling thing. This is in the example how the different colours are put in, and the same with the buttons. So when you toggle the relay, it flips to the other state. The ping, we'll leave that for a minute, and the clock, well at the moment that's not styled, so let's go and do something to that. What I've got here are some preset styles, so I'll do the first one, turn off the second. It's just a matter of commenting and uncommenting the appropriate lines. Now, how I've got it here, clock size the clock colour, the digit colour, and the clock background are all on a line. So those three items, you can sort of change them and enable them as you want. The thing to be aware of is that all the sizes are in the bit that types to screen. The units are EM, which are scalable. So if you have a pixel based size unit, well, that depends very much on the resolution of the screen. So you get a very high resolution screen, a certain number of pixels won't show up on it very much, it'd be very small, whereas a very small low res screen, the same number of pixels might fill it almost. Whereas EM units is independent of the screen resolution, it's more relative, and you can do various aspects as EM, so which we'll get to in a sec, but width, height, font size, even the borders, everything can be quoted as EMs. And then when you change something like this, they all change relatively. So let's see what this looks like. That's the size it was. So that's quite a lot nice. I like that one actually. It's not in your face, but it's very clear. So that's 1.8 EM, dim grey foreground on an Alice blue background. So these are just variables that the screen routine reads in and sets the text box accordingly, because the clock is in a text box. There's no JavaScript on this one, so you just set in the text box style parameters. Background color is set to that, foreground to that, and the size, and then it's adding the EM after the numbers that it puts in there. Right, well, here's something else that we can do. And another point to make about the styling is that the CSS is additive. Okay, so this line has specified the width, and the alignment of the text, and the font family Arial. So I'm going to uncomment this line, and it's exactly the same CSS ID for the clock, but this is giving it a transform scale, which is basically on the height. It's making it 1.5 times what it should be, but it's additive, so it doesn't do away with any of the previous. Let's just sort of prove that point. It's changing the horizontal scale half as big again. So if we run that now, okay, it's additive. And to prove that again, we can uncomment the font weight. So having made it 1.5 times the height, now we make it bold. And the last one. Is making the font italic. So any of the style can be added without having to specify everything every time. I don't particularly like the italic, so I'm going to get rid of that. What we will do, while we've still got some of this style set, let's go and choose a different set of parameters for it. So that's yellow on dim grey, and obviously bigger. If you want a clock, that's quite nice colouring. That's 3.5 EM. So there's one more, just to show how easy it is to be able to change styles. This is lime green on black, 4.5 EM size. So very, very easy to change. Likewise with the button. Right, I don't want this in the face quite so much. Let's prove the point. So we'll comment that, uncomment the first one. No, the second one I think was quite nice. Uncomment the second one. So I can keep an eye on the second count there for the different events that have to happen without it being too much in your face. Right, now that's a square button with rounded corners. You have a look, the height and width are equal, so it's square, it's not a rectangular button. That's secondary. The main purpose of making the height and the width the same is with 50% rounding of the button, which I've got another pre-configured button size. Let's run that. Show button of a pre-configured shape. So let me right, now this is going to look different. So setting the height and width to be equal in EM units makes it very scalable, and if you have 50% rounded corners, it gives you a round button, which I think is very pleasant actually. Just to go back and show button size at the moment is 4.5. Let's tell you what I'll do. I'll make it 4.9, so it's a bit bigger, noticeably bigger, but not in your face bigger. Yeah. Right. So all of this is to get explain the usage. So we can see our clock. The way I've got the clock set up is every 10 seconds when the second hand changes to 0. That's the trigger point if there's a corresponding event time. So clock saying 11:15. That event is an off, it's green. I'll be coming back to that in a minute, but so I know that that's a scheduled off, and it's scheduled for 11:15. So if I stop this, I've got the script with set time towards the top. This is just to differentiate the hours, minutes and seconds from the date. I'm not interested in the date for this. So it's doing a set time, and it's setting the time to 11:14 and 54 seconds. So when I start the script running, that'll be the time that comes up in the clock, and the next event after that is this second one here. Is 11:15, and it's a scheduled 0, which now we're down here, I'll explain them. 0 is an off. Right, start again. So for the scheduled events, you put in the time, hours, minutes, comma, and then the type of activity. So the activity is 0 for off, 1 for an on, 2 for a toggle, 3 to bounce, 4 to jump to the user subroutine, and 5 to do a scheduled reboot. So again, I've got different things which we'll come and show in a minute, but this shows that they don't have to be in time order. Each trigger time, so every 10 seconds, all of these are scanned, and if there's any one of them that corresponds, that event gets triggered, whatever the comma number event is. In this case at 11:15 it's 0, so it's off, so it will actually off. Because the this script is a watchdog to look after something that should normally be on, let's say a router, then it defaults to switching the relay on. So that's 1 minus relay off. That will turn it on. So what I've got here, this first event, it's not first in the list, but it's first in time, is an off. So if we right, when this gets to 0, it's scheduled the off. So what I can do is choose another time, let's say a toggle, which is a 2, which is 4:15. So if I change that to 4, so that when it starts up the time is 4:14, and whatever it's currently at, it will toggle it when it reaches the changeover. Right, now just to prove that point, I'll do it again, but I will manually turn it off. And it gets toggled on. Right, so we'll do one more, which will be the bounce, which is number 3, which is 16:15, so we'll go just before it. Right, now from what we know here, when it schedules a bounce, it's going to toggle it from whatever state it was in, pause 5 seconds, and then toggle it again. So in this case, it's going to start up as on and be toggled off for 5 seconds. Now the pause for the 5 seconds is blocking, so the clock's not going to be counting up during that, but we know to expect that. So Let's go and toggle it off for 5 seconds, which we're not going to see, but then back on. So that would have switched the router off and back on. Right, I think that's the scheduler put to bed. Saying that, let's just go through these pre-configured ones. So this is showing you can have as many and repeat them, but obviously you wouldn't have the same times. But in this case, this is turning on, it's red. Turning on at midnight, off at 12:15, on at 1 o'clock, off at 1:15, and it's doing that on the hour, every hour, turning it on for 15 minutes and then off through till basically lunchtime. So there's not really any limit to how many times you can switch something on and off, but obviously you don't have to. And what you might want to do, if it's being used as a watchdog for instance, is simply schedule it to reboot in the early hours of the morning, every morning. And that's useful. I use that for my CCTV camera. Well, that's the camera. And this is the nightly reboot for it, which just does a scheduled reboot. In fact, I haven't seen that for a while. Let me have a quick look. Well, I've got it set for doing it at 7 o'clock in the evening. So, you know, whatever the event is, it might be a user, trigger the user event that you put in your own code to do something at a specific time. In this case though, I've just got it to reboot itself so that it's never gonna get lost, hang up. It's always going to be available, doing its main job of watchdog, looking at the client device that is pinging, which we'll get to now. Right, so let me get rid of the scheduler actually before I do that, because I don't want the scheduled event still occurring. So I'll disable the scheduler, then hide it. Right, so the watchdog has got different modes all on the same variable. So if it's 0, it's disabled. Grayed out. If it's 1, where are we? If it's 1, it is enabled initially, but after a lost contact, if it's configured to do any activity, which it is at the moment, is the bounce, it'll bounce the device, but in case the device is gone for good and you may not want to keep on monitoring it, filling up a log and bouncing something that is definitely not there, so this option makes it disable itself after losing contact. It will flag up the lost contact, it'll bounce it, and then it'll pay no more interest in it. So let's just do that and show it working. Enable it. Right, so it checks it when it switches to the 0 of the second count every 10 seconds. So stop and start it again. So you can see it doesn't know at the moment, but it's pinged it and it's had a reply, so it's gone green. Right. This is a development option. Show dev is on, so this is available. All this does is stops the actual ping from going out. So if I turn that off, it's as if the client device is not there because it can't reply. So when this now gets to the ping, it says, oh, it's not there. And it does the reboot and then disables itself, so it won't ever do that again. Let me just stop and start. Right, so the router's on, it's plugged into this relay. So disable ping, so this is going to lose contact and it's going to bounce. So this will go off for 5 seconds and then back on, and then this disables itself. It won't ever go through those motions again, but maybe you would want to. So it might be a particularly faulty item that you know if you bounce, like my camera. Sometimes it's a pan and tilt auto tracking camera, and it gets its knickers in a twist. So if it's rebooted, it starts up from fresh fine. So if you've got something like that, you may want to keep monitoring it and rebooting it whenever it hangs. So now, same, wait till it gets the ping, and then disable pinging. So now it'll, at the 0, it'll notice there's no contact, reboot, but this time it'll stay enabled. So if we now, let's say the router or whatever it was has come up in and is now available. So now when it reaches the ping period, it will reconnect, and that will just keep going indefinitely. So very useful option. So that pretty much covers it, except for there is another option which is 3 or more, and what that does is add a quiet yellow warning period, 10 seconds in this case, but if it was pinging every minute, it would add an extra 1 minute's quiet warning when the contact is lost before it triggers the event, the recovery event. So if I put that to 3, save it, the only difference now, wait for it to connect. Right, now the only difference is before it does the reboot, when it finds it gets no response, it gives this yellow warning, quiet warning, but device isn't touched. Now it's done the reboot, so that is setting the Watchdog to 3. Any number greater than 3 is exactly the same, except for it gives it extra. 4 will now have another, so a total of 2 quiet warnings. But if you put it to 14, it would have 12 quiet warnings. So basically you can make it wait as long as you like before it actually gets desperate enough to reboot the device. So this is why the clock is handy up here, because you can see what's going to happen when. Right, so there's your first warning. But I set it for 2, so when it reaches 0, it'll just go into the second quiet yellow warning. But that's all used up now, so when it reaches 0 again, it will do the recovery and bounce it. Right, what next? Okay, so RAM free and flash free are green, and if I go to my sentry alarm, I've got similar. My free memory is green, but this has a log file which is text, and when you start saving text characters in Annex, it eats up memory. So at the moment my log only has this in it, but if it was down here it would be using a lot more memory, and there can come a point. Let me clear the log. Well, this is exactly what I would do. If the log got too large without me clearing it, then eventually there come a point where this would turn red and warn me that you know I need to go and clear the log, which I'll do now. View it again, and you'll see I've just got the record that it was cleared. So that's what. Let's get rid of that. That's what the memlow level warning is. So you set that to whatever you want as a threshold below which it will turn red to warn you that you're getting low on memory. The flash is the same now for different reasons. Each time you save this to 12, so this is saving a new. I'll go back here just to remind you. Still ticking away nicely. Alright, I'm going to save this to a new name, increment it, so save. I don't overwrite the previous if I do bad changes which screw everything up. I've still got the previous available. Right, now it's gone pink because it's used up some extra flash spiff's memory by saving another copy of the file under a different file name, which has dropped the free flash less than the flash low setting that I had, which is purely to demonstrate I can save a lot more copies before it gets the point is when you save a file it takes up a certain amount of the spiff's flash memory, so you don't want it to use up enough memory to not allow you to save anymore. So if you set this just above what that limit is, for as long as it's green you know you can save like we've just done, but when it goes red, it's warning you, well, you won't be able to save it anyway, so you better copy and paste it to a text file now, and then do some housekeeping to clear up some of the old versions. I think that's about it, except for there's one more bit of styling that might be of interest here, and that is, if I get rid of that, you could use this as a backdoor, a hidden backdoor that only you're aware of. Because if you hover, you need to know where it is. If you hover over it for about a second, it'll make it visible, and then you can click it on and it stay on. So that could do anything that you wanted. Give you a log-on password box, for instance, that wouldn't be available normally, wouldn't be visible. Hover over it, it slowly comes up. So that is an animation effect to make it slowly. Also, there's a delay, so it doesn't suddenly start coming up. There's a delay of about a second before it starts. So you can travel over it and it doesn't become visible, but if you hover, and also when you drop off it, it does disappear instantly. Okay, so that is here. So all of this other stuff, if it's enabled, is shown, and then it sets up a div with an appropriate ID, and then styles it, and thank you Francesco for the style information to get this going. It styles it so that it has its two states of visible and invisible by being opaque. That's the way I've done it. But you can have the transition for 0.7 seconds, this is, and the transition delay before the transition will even start for 0.5 of a second before it changes the opacity. So that's quite neat, but you can do all sorts of other things. And while we're on about that, as far as the colours are concerned, like Alice Blue, you're not going to sort of know that off the top of your head. Well, so w3schools.com has got some great tutorial pages. Colour names is a good one. There's your Alice Blue. So you can flick down anything that grabs your interest. Ooh, deep pink, dark violet, whatever. And you can, these are the codes which you can put in instead of the name to give different colours. Then you've got these shades. That's quite handy as well. Shades of grey, for instance. But shades of the other colours. And you can copy and paste these. And you can put these values in place of the actual colour names. But also you can get all the information on the style things that you can play around with. I won't go through this, there's so much there, but it's great fun. Transitions, transforms, that's what this is. So have fun.